It all began with a sound. A faint knocking behind the old library wall. Nobody believed me until I touched the wall, and it moved. Inside the dusty shelves, I found a box. Inside the box, a rusted key, tied with a note. Do not open. But curiosity always wins, doesn't it? That night, I returned. The key fit perfectly into a hidden lock. The wall creaked open, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. As I stepped inside, the air grew colder. Then came the whisper, soft, chilling, calling my name. I wasn't alone. If you're watching this far, you're brave. But the story only gets darker from here. At the end of the stairs was a locked room. Carvings on the door warned to turn back, now, but I pushed it open anyway. Inside were hundreds of journals, each with my name, each describing moments of my life that hadn't happened yet. And on the final page of the last journal, it read, "The one watching this story will be next." It all began with a sound, a faint, rhythmic knocking that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I was alone in the Old Town Library, long after closing, cataloging a new donation of dusty, forgotten books. The building itself was ancient, a relic of a time when secrets were built into the very architecture. The silence was usually absolute, broken only by the whisper of turning pages or the creak of the old wooden floors. But that night, there was something else. Tap, 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 tap. At first, I dismissed it. Old pipes, maybe, the building settling. But it was too consistent, too deliberate. It was coming from the far wall of the main reading room, the one lined with centuries of local history. Nobody would believe me, I thought. I was probably just tired, my mind playing tricks on me in the echoing emptiness. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the brittle pages in front of me. The smell of old paper and leather, a familiar comfort, but the sound persisted. A patient, insistent heartbeat in the stone. Tap, tab, tab, pluta. Curiosity, that dangerous old friend, finally got the better of me. I pushed my chair back, the screech of its legs on the polished wood sounding unnervingly loud. I walked towards the wall, my own footsteps echoing the mysterious rhythm. The closer I got, the more distinct the sound became. It wasn't in the pipes. It was coming from asterisk inside asterisk the wall. I pressed my ear against the cool, flocked wallpaper, the pattern faded and peeling. The knocking was clearer now, a soft but definite pulse against my cheek. My heart hammered in my chest. This was impossible. My fingers traced the seams of the wallpaper, searching for any irregularity, any hint of what could be behind it, and then I felt it. A slight indentation, almost imperceptible. It was a keyhole, cleverly disguised within the floral pattern. A keyhole. My mind raced. I'd worked in this library for 5 years. I knew every nook, every cranny, or so I thought. I scanned the shelves nearby, my eyes darting from spine to spine. There, tucked behind a thick volume of town records, was a small, ornate iron key. It was cold to the touch, heavy, and covered in a fine layer of dust, as if it hadn't been disturbed in 100 years. My hand trembled as I inserted the key into the hidden lock. It turned with a surprisingly smooth, soft click. The sound echoed in the cavernous room, followed by a low groan of ancient mechanisms stirring to life. I held my breath, watching as a section of the bookshelf, the very wall I'd been staring at, began to recede inward, revealing a dark, narrow opening. A wave of cold, musty air washed over me, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something indescribably old. A staircase, carved from the same dark stone as the library's foundation, spiraled down into blackness. The knocking had stopped. The silence that replaced it was heavier, more profound than before. It felt like the library itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to turn around, to lock the wall, and forget I ever saw this. To go home and pretend it was all a dream. But the mystery was a hook, and it was lodged deep. I had to know what was down there. I had to know who or what had been knocking. The story doesn't end here. It only just begins. In the darkness, at the bottom of those stairs, the air grows colder with every step, and the secrets hidden below are far stranger than a simple hidden room. Do you dare to continue? Do you have the courage to follow me down into the shadows and discover what's been waiting in the dark all this time? Stay with me, because what I found next changed everything. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone, its flashlight cutting a nervous beam into the oppressive dark. The stone steps were slick with a thin film of moisture, and I placed each foot with deliberate care. The circular staircase seemed to go on forever, spiraling deeper into the earth beneath the library. The air grew thick and heavy, and a profound sense of isolation washed over me. It felt like I was descending into a forgotten tomb. Finally, my foot touched a solid, level floor. I swept the beam of light around. I was in a small, circular chamber, no larger than a walk-in closet. The walls were lined not with books, but with dozens of small, leather-bound journals, all identical. They were arranged neatly on stone shelves, each one marked with a year. The air was frigid, and I could see my breath fogging in the flashlight's beam. A small, simple wooden desk and chair sat in the center of the room, and on that desk, one journal lay open. I approached it cautiously, an inexplicable sense of dread creeping up my spine. The handwriting inside was an elegant, looping script, written in faded brown ink. The entry was dated over a century ago. It described a feeling of being watched, of a presence in the library. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. As I read on, the journal began to describe events I recognized. It described the library's renovation in the 1980s. It described the day I was hired 5 years ago, even mentioning my name. My hands started to shake. This was impossible. How could a journal written 100 years ago know my name? I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding against my ribs. It detailed small, insignificant moments from my life spilling coffee on a rare manuscript. A conversation I'd had just last week with a patron. It was all there, recorded in perfect detail. The writer spoke of a chronicle, a duty to observe and record the future they could somehow see. They wrote of a cycle, of a watcher, and a successor. Then I got to the final entry, dated today. My breath hitched in my throat. It read, "The knocking will finally be answered. The new watcher will find the key. They will descend the stairs, their heart full of fear and curiosity. They will find this journal and understand." The script was precise, chillingly calm. I felt a presence in the room with me, a weight in the air, as if the author of these words was standing right behind me. I slammed the journal shut, a cloud of dust puffing into the air. My mind was reeling, trying to process the sheer impossibility of it all. These journals, they predicted the future, or, more accurately, they had recorded it before it even happened. The person who wrote this knew I would be here, right now, reading these exact words. The knocking. It wasn't a call for help. It was an invitation. Ah, Ah, summons. A new thought, sharp and terrifying, cut through my panic. If this journal predicted my arrival, what else did it predict? I looked at the shelves, at the rows upon rows of identical books. One shelf was empty, save for a single, brand new journal and a fountain pen, waiting. The message was clear. The previous watcher's time was over. Now, it was my turn, my duty. But as I stood there, frozen in the cold, silent chamber, a final, horrifying realization dawned on me. The last line on the very last page of the open journal wasn't about me. It was about you. Scrawled in what looked like a much hastier, more desperate hand were 7 final words. The one watching this story will be next. Thank you so much for joining me on this terrifying journey. If you want to find out what happens next, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss part 2. Let me know in the comments what you think that final message means. Stay safe, and see you next time.